So what is going on, guys? Hockey Guy 1 here. Welcome to my review of Goldfinger. So Goldfinger is directed by Guy Hamilton and stars Sean Connery, Honor Blackman, Gert Frobe, Shirley Eaton, Tanya Mellett, Bernard Lee, and Louis Maxwell. The story is about James Bond, who's basically kind of like investigating this whole situation with Goldfinger, how he's kind of like smuggling all this gold all around the world, and basically like kind of how he's kind of like cheating with everything, and basically just trying to stop him, see like more what's going on with his affairs, and kind of like stop him with those. Story is really good, as basically it kind of feels like they kind of like bring it into a new direction. It's basically like Spectre's not really involved in this movie like at all, unlike the first two, where they actually are very heavily involved in those two movies. In this movie, they kind of have a different kind of villain with Goldfinger here, and kind of like investigating it, really kind of showing more of exactly how much Bond really has to do when he's spying. And I do really like how they end up doing that with this movie, as it definitely does progress pretty well with how it's doing it, especially since this is a movie where he's like investigating heavily, and you can definitely see how he's pretty smart, and I definitely do like the direction they brought this story. The structure of the story is really good. It basically kind of starts out with the first act, basically, where it kind of shows the opening kind of action scene where Bond is like fighting someone, and like threatening to kill him by like throwing a toaster inside of a bathtub. And it does kind of start the movie off pretty well with like a really interesting action scene. And then again, like after the whole opening credits kind of thing, it kind of shows him kind of investigating in Goldfinger, and it's kind of how I'm kind of like getting on about it. And I did really like how they kind of like show that it's basically, it does kind of like introduce the whole idea there of what exactly he's doing, and so you can see that like he's kind of like looking at him and seeing how he's like kind of like cheating on like the kind of card games and these stuff, and it's pretty interesting to see how that goes. And then there's the whole second act, basically they end up killing off. And basically, it does pretty work out well. It's basically, it kind of like shows Goldfinger how like being intimidating, what exactly he's doing, and it does like really progress the story well. And I just especially really like how it kind of like still shows investigating more and more, and eventually like he does end up getting captured by Goldfinger, which is definitely kind of like a big thing with this plot, and it definitely does work to this movie, and I just think that progressed pretty well. And basically, it does eventually get to the climax where basically it has Bond kind of like fight Goldfinger on a plane, and I really like how they do that. It definitely feels like it was built up to that point, and it was definitely worth all the build up there. And you kind of got the whole end of the movie basically right after that, where you kind of like Bond kind of like parachutes up the plane, basically surprises it, and kind of goes with the present. And I do feel like it definitely does enough pretty well, as it definitely does feel like it concludes this movie's story, and it definitely does feel like it's a completed story and just completely concluded. The pacing is really good, as this movie definitely does feel like it's complete. It feels like it gets to runtime from when it gets to like when he's investigating Goldfinger to like when he kind of kills Jill, and then he's kind of like with Jill's sister, and she ends up dying, and like pretty much everything about this really does feel like it was put out to be as long as it was, and it definitely does feel like it's fast enough, and it does feel like it's a completed movie, and definitely does have good pacing. The action is really good, immediately from like the opening sequence. You know, how it's a little silly like the last two movies, like, but I do really, like I said, I do really like the silly kind of style for this. I mean, it works because it still kind of like makes it entertainingly silly, and definitely does like work for the action scenes. I mean, they still use some creative things to it, like the whole toaster into like one thing that Bond uses. I mean, they use a lot of creativity into the action scenes when making it a little silly, so I do feel like it works pretty well for this movie. James Bond is, again, a really well-written character. It's basically just the way his character was written in this movie. I mean, obviously in this one, he has to try, basically, like investigate Goldfinger kind of like style, and I do really like that. I mean, it really progresses his character. It really shows how smart he is with the spy. Is basically like you can see more with his character than this. And how smart he is. Basically he uses things to advantage. Like at the beginning, an open scene, like kind of like when he throws toaster into water again, like that kind of like showed how smart he was, and he knew that. And basically just how smart he was, like when he was in a spy, like he got getting captured by Goldfinger in the prison, but he still ended up like a really silly, but yet it was kind of smart way to get out of the prison. I mean, and it ended up working, and like causing to like look at more of Goldfinger's son, like look at more of it, and it definitely just showed how smart he was, and just how much his character is progressing throughout the movie, as it shows how smart he is just to try and get out of the situation, just to try and basically get his job done. Sleek Laura is basically the Bond girl in this movie, and it is kind of a silly name for sure, but like her character is pretty good. I mean, I do like exactly where they bring her character. It makes sense for what it is. I mean, for a Bond girl, she definitely is a bit different from the other two Bond girls before this. I mean, she's basically with Goldfinger pretty much the entire movie until basically the end when Bond like parachutes down with her, and I do think that it's a pretty good way to kind of bring her character, and I do think it makes sense and it fits well into the story, and definitely makes sense for the story and fits in well with it. Goldfinger is a really good villain. I really like how intimidating they made him. Basically, you can definitely see like he almost has Bond a couple times. I mean, he captures him, and he's definitely really intimidating, as he really does not want Bond to get involved in his affairs, and just nearly kills him a couple times. And basically, you can see how intimidating he is. And he basically is trying to like smuggle a lot of gold from other places, and I do feel like it definitely does work for this thing. I like him as a villain. He's definitely a fantastic villain in this movie, and I definitely feel like just the way they made his character just really intimidating really helps a lot, and it just really works for this movie. As basically, I mean, he's easily the most intimidating of the three villains so far, and I definitely feel like they do a good job really making that way with how he captures Bond, and definitely has like these very well laid out plans, and it just really works for this movie. And especially since like he kills Jill as well as her sister, I mean, it just makes him really intimidating, and it just makes him easily probably one of the best Bond villains, to be honest. The acting is really good. Again, Sean Connery once again does a fantastic job as James Bond, really feeling confident in his role. And same thing with Honor Blackman is put together. She just does a really good job feeling confident with each and every line she says. And then there's Gert Frobe as Goldfinger, really feeling intimidating with his delivery, just really feeling like the character with every single line delivery, just feeling intimidating every time he says it. Cinematography is really good, as they do a really good job kind of like showing the camera angles, really expressing the character's emotions when needed, and I definitely do feel like they have to show the last scene a lot, and definitely do work for each moment that they do it for. It usually captures the scene pretty well, and definitely works for the scenes that they're in. They're close to make sense, and they're really showing the character's emotions, and it definitely works out pretty well in that case. And so like how they show the landscape scene a lot, and it just really works for this movie. The editing is really good, as when it comes from one shot to another, it's really smooth, and I especially like how they do a lot of scene transitions. It just kind of like does the whole thing, like, where it kind of like lacks out and comes in. I feel like it works a lot whenever they do it, as basically it kind of happens when I'm gets captured, and I do really like how they do these transitions from one shot to another, as it really works out pretty well, and the scenes definitely do feel like they're completed well, and definitely is pretty good. The score is really good. The main Goldfinger song really works for this movie. Basically, it kind of talks about what exactly Goldfinger is, like how his character kind of is, and I do feel like it just makes sense for the movie, as basically he's the main villain, and basically it's trying to describe exactly what exactly Goldfinger is supposed to be, and I feel like that's just a good way to kind of show the kind of Bond theme. Set designs are really good. I especially like the looks of the kind of plane, as it really does feel like a plane, and same thing with the whole kind of like base of Goldfinger. It does look really good. Basically, it's kind of like you can see this guy is kind of like a real place. I really like the way they designed it. It's really cool and like gives off the looks of kind of a main place, but really under it has a prison under it. And I especially like the design of that. It's pretty smart. I mean, I like the way it's kind of like hidden like that, and it makes sense for it, and it's really cool, and especially really like how they kind of made the whole scene like where Bond like catches Goldfinger, kind of like changing the card game. I really like how they end up doing that, and actually it seems like the golf course like it just looks really cool. It looks exactly like on a golf course would look like, and I do think they did a really good job with the sets in this movie. Overall, Goldfinger is a masterpiece and is so far my favorite Bond movie. So I'm going to give Goldfinger a 10 out of 10. That was my review of Goldfinger. What are your thoughts on Goldfinger? Tell me in the comments below. I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.